I am Marjori Krebs. I'm currently the Director of Licensure for the College of Education and Human Sciences. I'm also a professor in teacher education, educational leadership and policy, and I work with our teacher licensure programs and other programs that our students receive licensure from the state of New Mexico, and mainly focus the work on teacher preparation and teacher residencies.
What drew you into teacher education, and what experiences shaped how you approach this work today?
I didn't have a path in mind to enter teacher education. I was a high school social studies teacher right out of college, and I loved it. Every time my husband got a new job, I got another degree. And so I ended up with a doctorate in teacher preparation from, in educational leadership from Bowling Green State University, and that timed perfectly with my husband becoming the athletic director here at University of New Mexico. And so I was offered a postdoctoral position and then became a faculty member a year later. But I realized looking back, it's where I always should have been. I loved teaching, and then I realized I loved teaching adults how to teach, because then my skills as a teacher were able to be applied exponentially to many classrooms of students, not just my own. So I love it, and I believe it's a perfect fit.
When you think about community engagement in teacher preparation, what does that actually look like in practice?
I believe that for our teachers to be successful, they need to understand the families with whom they work and also the communities in which they work. And the same thing goes for our teacher preparation programs. We need to understand the communities in which we're preparing teachers to teach. And so we want to make sure that our students know and understand how to reach out to their families and connect to those students from the community in which they live, but also for us as a college to connect to our districts and charter schools who need our students as teachers. So we also need to understand what those district and charter school needs are so that we can better prepare teachers to fit into their environments as well.
What would you say is unique about the communities in New Mexico?
The communities of New Mexico, I believe, are very focused on the importance of family and also the diverse cultures that students come from in our schools. And our teachers need to understand how to learn about those cultures and bring those backgrounds and those diverse languages into the classroom. So if you're teaching a unit on storytelling, then you want your children to bring in stories from their families and their communities. So if you're teaching a unit on science, then you would want to bring in information from various cultures and how they integrate science into their culture as well. So anything teachers can do to connect with that home life and the backgrounds that students have really make the learning much more meaningful.
How do service learning and project-based learning help future teachers understand the communities they serve?
I love implementing service learning and project-based learning into teaching. It was my primary research area. I love doing it as a teacher because it connects what students are learning directly to their communities. So, for example, if a school is going to do a food drive, then you need to understand who's going to be receiving that food, what kind of food do they need, learn about where they can get the food, and then connect all of that to bringing foods in for people to have distributed to them. So there has to be a direct understanding from the teacher's point of view to the community in which they're serving. And those students are part of that community so that it helps them understand their students, and that helps their students then understand the needs of their community. They will be the future leaders and problem solvers of the issues that we're working on with service learning. So let's get them started early to understand what the problems and issues are and what some of those solutions are. And we can do that by connecting it to the curriculum that students are studying.
Can you share an example where a service learning or community-based project created meaningful impact for both teacher candidates and a partner community?
I have a great story that I love to tell. A fourth grade teacher had been teaching poetry, and she was a graduate student of mine. And she just said, my kids are not into poetry. And so she loved animals, and she had a connection with the animal shelter in town. So she took her students to the animal shelter. They each selected an animal. They wrote a poem from the perspective of that animal. And then the shelter posted that poem on the outside cage where that animal was, and their adoptions skyrocketed because it was a personal connection of the words of that animal to the person who was looking at them and seeking a pet. And then the students began to understand the importance of spaying and neutering your pets, how government support animals in our community, what the role of government is, city government, county government, all of that fit in with social studies. Plus, they were learning poetry, and they learned how to value their voice in making a difference in their own community. I just love that project, and it's made a huge difference for the pets and the families in our community.
You work closely with teacher residency programs. What is teacher residency and why is this model especially important for New Mexico?
I love talking about our teacher residency at the University of New Mexico. It's called the District Partner Teacher Residency. We didn't call it the UNM Teacher Residency for a reason, and that is because the focus is on our district partners. Who are we preparing our teachers for? What type of teachers do our districts and charter schools need? And our teacher residency comes from funding from the state of New Mexico. The legislature has provided $35,000 a year for each student who is a teacher resident for that year that they're learning how to teach. So they're in classrooms full time, also taking classes, and then they learn about the district, the culture. We were talking about the families earlier, and they learn about how to teach in that charter school or district. And then the district then agrees to hire them the following year, and that resident agrees to stay for a minimum of 3 years. We hope they stay for 30 years, but we want to get them committed early on to that district. So it's a great project for our students to learn from a co-teacher for a full year how to teach. They start with professional development in August, go all the way through May, where they're putting the chairs up on the desks and sweeping the floors. They see the full picture of the school year. They are not new teachers when they're hired to start that August. They understand all the workings of the district, how to work with students with special needs, the cultures and community from which the families come to their school. And then the districts hire them without all the onboarding and learning that is typically a part of bringing in a new teacher. Because these people are not new teachers. They're just transitioning in with the keys to the door across the hall. So it's a great program that the state of New Mexico legislature has sponsored, and UNM has gone full in on our students being able to be residents if they choose. And this year we have 98 residents finishing this spring, and our goal is to have over 100 for next year. And that's about a fourth of the residents in the state of New Mexico. So we're really proud of our teacher residency program. And the reason that it is important for teachers is that it brings in especially career changers. People who might have always had a heart to be a teacher, but they couldn't quit their job at the bank to spend a year in a classroom learning to teach for free. You just can't do that. So providing this stipend enables them to bridge their previous career into teaching, and we're bringing in great people who are dedicated to the kids and the communities in New Mexico.
From your experience, what makes a school university partnership truly collaborative rather than transactional?
We have historically operated with transactional experiences in teacher preparation specifically, and that is we have students who may want to be secondary science teachers, and we find a school that has someone who will help them learn how to be a secondary science teacher, and they finish their degree at UNM, and then they start searching for a job. Well, in a true partnership, we've talked to those districts and they said, we have a great secondary science teacher. What we need is a secondary English language arts and then special ed teachers. So we're able to talk to our students about considering teaching in those districts for the licensure needs of that district. So we're purposely recruiting and preparing teachers that will meet the needs of our district partners. The district partners interview these students before they become students in their classrooms to make sure they're a good fit. They support them throughout the year. The students get the technology access from that district. We didn't have any of that before we began these really close conversations with our districts. Our purpose as a university is to meet the needs of our community, I believe. And we have to talk to those people in the community to understand what those needs are, then work from our side to see what we can provide in terms of curriculum, student preparation, to get students ready to serve their communities. So we have to be in collaboration from recruitment to retention, hiring, and forward.
How do teacher residencies affect not just the teachers in training, but also K to 12 students, families, and schools?
For the teacher residency, part of what was put into the legislation is a concept of co-teaching. Typically in student teaching environments, if I'm the student teacher and you're the teacher, I'm going to sit and watch what you do for a few weeks, and then you're going to say, okay, why don't you give it a try? And then I go up and try it. That really is a detriment to the students because the students are getting me, who's a less experienced person, trying to work with them and try things out. With co-teaching, both of us purposely plan and work with the kids at the same time all day long.
Mhm.
So maybe we split the students in half and we're each teaching a smaller group of students. Maybe we do stations and rotate around and help the students work together. But I'm not just watching, I'm up actively engaged in that work. And so I'm teaching from day one, up working with the kids, and that only benefits the kids. And there is some research that dates back about 15 years that definitely shows that having two actively engaged adults in the classroom improves student achievement. But you can see how it would also improve communication with families. And maybe I might explain something differently than you might. And then the student has two chances to understand a new concept. Communicating with families is really important, and they've got two people to connect with. If I am the classroom teacher and I'm too busy, then the resident can answer that question because we both know what's going on with the student. So it only benefits the students and the families to a greater extent, but it also certainly impacts the teacher candidate who is preparing and has been on their feet actively teaching for the full school year.
Your work includes community engaged initiatives connected to Indigenous communities, including Zuni focused work. What has that taught you about honoring community knowledge in teacher preparation?
We had a great project with the Zuni public schools under the leadership of Mr. Hayes Lewis, who was the superintendent of Zuni public schools. He wanted his teachers to better connect their curriculum to the Zuni community through service learning and project-based learning. So we were able to work with teachers on specifically using the Zuni language in their classrooms to teach certain concepts. So we did workshop with teachers. This was over 5 years. But we also worked with educational assistants and other community members to get their teaching licenses and teach in Zuni. And that community connection with teachers coming from their community and giving back to their community is really, I believe, what's at the heart of our New Mexico partnerships. Valuing the Indigenous language and stories and culture and helping that be integrated into the school and the curriculum makes learning meaningful. We can't take a curriculum that was developed in New Jersey and think that it's going to make sense for kids in Zuni, New Mexico. We have to be more creative and inclusive of what's happening in the community, how we use the values of that community to teach the curriculum.
So, what do you think were the most difficult challenges in trying to work with teachers or people that spoke Zuni?
Our first goal was to establish relationships and to meet their needs. We did not come in with, okay, here's our plan for teaching service learning. We sat down with the superintendent, Mr. Lewis, with his staff, with some of the leaders of the teachers who were joining us, and listened. What would help you better serve this community? And then we were able to incorporate lessons learned from our experience and research on service learning and project-based learning to connect to those Zuni classrooms. But the first challenge was to get to know each other. We needed to understand each other's perspectives. The university system is very complex, and there are many first-generation college students coming from our indigenous communities that the language makes no sense. When I started college and went to meet with an advisor, they were talking about credit hours, 3 credit hours, and I had no idea what they were talking about. So I was able to bring in that experience and understand that we needed to be more open as a university for students coming in from our pueblos. For example, through the grant from the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, we provided gas cards so that they had gas money to travel from Zuni to UNM Gallup to take their classes. That's a small thing, but students that I talk to today in Zuni still talk about the gas cards and what a difference that made to them just to give them access. So there's lots of listening and understanding that needs to happen from the university if we're really going to serve our entire state of New Mexico and its communities.
What do you think are the biggest challenges new teachers are facing today, and how should preparation programs respond?
I believe we are responding to those biggest challenges by having our students in classrooms for a full year to really see how a student can grow and change. There are many challenges that teachers face today. Certainly in the upper grades, students who began their schooling during the pandemic are still working on socializing and understanding how to be in school. Attendance is a problem. I think teachers need to be more proactive in communicating with families and understanding their concerns, and how to connect with them for their child to be successful in school. I do think the national stories that we hear about violence in schools is very concerning for teachers. There are many standards and changes that continue to come into education, ideally to make it better, to make our classrooms better, to make our students be higher achievers. And yet teachers take on the brunt of, I've got this new curriculum now, I've got another new curriculum now, I need to, meet these testing standards. So I think there are a lot of expectations for teachers that sometimes are difficult to meet with all of their demands. So by having them present with a mentor for a full year helps our new teacher candidates understand what the work is, but also to see the joy in what the work is. So we're able to balance what the requirements are with what is so great about being a teacher.
For students considering a career in teaching, what mindset or value do you believe is most important to bring into the classroom?
You have to care. You have to care about your students and families and want the best for them. Teaching is a fabulous career. I can't imagine doing anything else. But there are a lot of careers that are important. I say this often. My banker's important. My real estate agent is important. My dentist is important. But they're not like Mrs. Camp and Mrs. Author and Mr. Phillips, who truly had an impact on my life. And that's my first grade teacher, my ninth grade teacher, and my sixth grade teacher. So when you're a teacher, people think back on their lives and can pinpoint you as the person that made the difference in their lives. And there's no other career like that. Yes, it's challenging. Yes, it's hard. Yes, you work during the day and you go home and work at night. But when you are blessed with being able to do meaningful work that could make a difference for generations, if you can help this kid graduate, then his life is on a different trajectory and his family's life is on a different trajectory. There's not another career like that where one person at a time can really change entire groups of people to help them move forward and then help New Mexico move forward. New Mexico needs great teachers so that as a state, we have great citizens, people who are committed and care about each other and want the best for our state and then for our country. And I believe all of that centers on having great teachers to point that out to students and help them get on their path to success, whatever that might be.
Looking ahead, what excites you most about the future of community engaged teacher preparation at UNM?
I think we're on a great path. We now know the people in our districts. They communicate with us. They tell us what they need. We're able to ask them, how can we help? What type of licensure areas do you need? What are your teachers facing that we can help prepare them at UNM? Because we've created this foundation of relationships, I'm really excited about the future of where this can go, how we can better partner in other ways. We've brought together our districts and our teachers. Well, what about our counselors? What about our nutritionists working in our school cafeterias? What about social workers that can connect with students in schools? If we continue our approach to listen to what our districts and schools need and then respond to that as an institution, we can make exponential impact on those organizations and on our state. I would like to say thank you to our districts for trusting us in this partnership and for understanding what we can bring to help them, but also what we need from them to understand their situation. We really can help our districts and charter schools be better, and they can help us be better. And I think if you have a relationship where you're both willing to grow and learn, then we have great plans for the future. I am Marjori Krebs. I'm currently the Director of Licensure for the College of Education and Human Sciences.